In the last episode, we left off with Murphy's daughter, Lucy, being kidnapped, but surprisingly, this little one wasn't scared at all in the car. Instead, she incessantly bombarded the kidnapper with questions. Unable to bear it, the kidnapper used an electric shocker meant for adults, aiming to knock Lucy unconscious, but what he didn't expect was...
Do it again! Do it again!
The man continued to increase the voltage, and this time Lucy started emitting black smoke, yet not showing the slightest fear.
Again! Zombies are my friends. They listen to me. The next time he stops, they're gonna come out of the woods and bite your face off.
Will you shut up?
I want my Aunt Addie!
Well, you're never gonna see her again because she's dead!
When Lucy heard that her beloved Aunt Addie was dead, she roared out in anger. At that moment, something bizarre happened. Murphy, sleeping miles away, suddenly woke up startled. Murphy couldn't understand why he felt restless and uneasy in that instant, as if he had a nightmare, yet it felt so real. Just as he was puzzled, the feeling came back, even more intense this time, making the whole room feel stiflingly hot and hard to breathe. But Wesson, beside him, didn't feel a thing, so it had to be a problem with Murphy himself. Murphy tried to leave the room to breathe some fresh air outside. At that moment, he felt something tightening around his neck, making it hard to breathe. Yet when Murphy tore open his shirt, there was nothing there. In reality, because Lucy kept making noise, the man, intending to teach her a lesson, directly put a bag over her head and tied it with a rope. Lucy experienced a suffocation she had never felt before, her struggles futile. 2 minutes later, the man slowly stopped the car on the roadside. After all, he just wanted to discipline her a bit. Lucy was his cash cow. As long as he could successfully return to Zona, he would surely rise to the top. But when the man removed the bag from Lucy's head, he was stunned. Lucy had grown to look like a 12 or 13-year-old.
You just wait until I tell my daddy what you did!
It was utterly baffling. Do the viewers remember that the foster father once mentioned Lucy grows rapidly when excited? It's just that the man didn't know. Meanwhile, Murphy also recovered from the discomfort. That feeling was too unbearable. He could never have imagined it was because his daughter was kidnapped. 10 minutes later, Addie, who came to rescue Lucy, also reached the road. Naturally, it would be best if she could successfully save Lucy. If not, it was up to Doc to call for backup. Doc was also anxious. He wanted to find a signal tower quickly to inform Citizen Z of Lucy's kidnapping and then have Citizen Z notify Roberta to come to their aid. Doc intended to first check if Citizen Z was online via the radio, but after tuning in, there was only a woman reciting poetry.
From my book, surcease of sorrow. And silken, sad, uncertain.
Not long after, Doc's eyes lit up. The place with the signal tower was just ahead, and he excitedly jogged forward. The building seemed to be an abandoned palace. 3 minutes later, he arrived at the entrance, which was lush and verdant, unclear if it was inhabited. Doc didn't dally and pushed the door open. Inside, it looked very clean and tidy, with lush plants, giving it a somewhat heavenly feel. But now wasn't the time to admire the scenery. The priority was to find a radio. As he walked, a colorful figure suddenly appeared beside him. They looked up at the same time, but Doc's face changed instantly. This was a zombie, only its surface was studded with colorful gems. Doc quickly pulled out his gun. Could these gems be bulletproof? Doc cursed silently and immediately turned to run. The zombie wouldn't let Doc go. And to make matters worse, another zombie appeared. What kind of place was this? Unfamiliar with the terrain, Doc could only run wildly, eventually ending up in a dead end. It was a trap. He couldn't escape. Even the crowbar he just took out was slapped away by a zombie. It was over, definitely over. He was going to die today. Just when Doc couldn't hold on any longer, the zombies suddenly stopped, followed by the sound of knocking on a basin. It seemed to be some kind of signal. The 3 zombies immediately became docile and ran towards the source of the sound. Doc finally escaped with his life, gasping for air, having hit his head on a railing and sustained a light injury, leaving him dizzy. Then, footsteps approached, and Doc struggled to look up. He saw 2 slender figures. Leading was a bald woman, followed by another woman of ethereal beauty, dressed in an enticing manner, and then a woman with glasses emerged. At this point, Doc was extremely weak. He hadn't clearly seen the newcomers before losing consciousness. The next morning, Doc's injuries were dressed, and he was changed into a white shirt, clean jeans, and a pair of green socks with a floral pattern. The three women stood neatly at the foot of the bed, seemingly admiring a piece of art. A few minutes later, Doc slowly opened his eyes. The three women greeted him and then, without any sense of boundaries, climbed onto the bed and began to take care of Doc. The most sensual woman was named Camilla, the one applying healing oils to Doc was called Sarah, and the tall, bald woman was named Linda. Their warmth towards him far exceeded the typical help offered by strangers. Doc wasn't naive. He knew there's no such thing as a free lunch, so he remained on guard. Upon Doc's inquiry, it turned out the castle indeed had a set of solar-powered radio equipment, and the woman who had been reciting poetry was the seductive Camilla. Doc eagerly asked to use the radio to send a message to his friends. The three women agreed without hesitation, but instead of taking him straight there, they helped him sit up and started grooming him. Camilla and Sarah tenderly fixed Doc's hair and beard. Linda even massaged Doc's waist, making him sigh in relief.
Up to me.
Regardless of the women's motives, which man could refuse such treatment? Better to enjoy first and worry later. After getting groomed, Doc was finally taken to the radio broadcasting room, where he excitedly attempted to call Citizen Z.
Citizen Z, come in. This is Delta X-Ray Delta. This is Doc. Do you copy?
But despite shouting for a long time, there was no response from Citizen Z's end. Then, Sarah walked in. She and her sisters exchanged a knowing look, possibly signaling each other. Nevertheless, they were genuinely kind to Doc, offering massages at any given moment.
We have a situation.
However, Doc hadn't noticed that 3 wires under the radio were disconnected. After another 10 minutes of calling without response, and worse, the machine stopped working. Camilla explained that sometimes it runs out of power. She comforted Doc not to worry and to try again tomorrow morning. After all, they had the top resources of the post-apocalyptic world, so he should enjoy his stay. With no other choice, Doc had to accept their hospitality. The 3 women then took Doc to visit a room filled with various items that looked somewhat eerie, ranging from skulls and masks to bizarre paintings. At noon, the women prepared a lavish meal, including vegetables, flowers, and a sticky substance that resembled meat. They explained it was their own cultivated grain protein.
Don't worry, it's vegan.
Gluten-free and locally sourced. There's no reason to stop caring about the environment. Earth is still our home.
Doc had never seen such food before. He picked up a piece and sniffed it, as the 3 women watched, seemingly curious if he would eat it.
Wow, this is really good. Tastes way better than I thought. You know, I went to a vegan Thanksgiving once, and I swear that turkey tastes just like paper mache.
During the meal, Linda's leg deliberately reached out to Doc, startling him, but he pretended not to notice. Now was not the time to be distracted by a lure. Addie was waiting for him to call for help. Camilla then expressed her liking for Doc's voice and reached out for comfort, which he didn't refuse because Camilla was too alluring. In short, all 3 women were making great efforts, seemingly vying for his favor. Doc quickly came to his senses, realizing he wasn't that charming. The meal left him flattered and sweating profusely. After lunch, Sarah, tapping a dish, went to the backyard to feed the cats. Doc was curious and came over to see that the cats they were talking about were zombies. And by the looks of it, the zombies had already been initially domesticated as pets. Camilla and Linda stood by with forks, ready to shock any disobedient zombies.
Net socks. Don't let his decrepit state fool you. He's a mischief maker.
Suddenly, a stray zombie charged at Doc from the side. He quickly dodged and knocked the zombie into a steel pipe. The women noticed and immediately rang the dish, causing the obedient zombies to run off to the distance. Doc felt somewhat apologetic, but the women weren't angry.
Worry, sweetie. Plenty more where that came from.
The lavish lifestyle continued into the night, with Doc seated on a single sofa, Sarah constantly offering him drinks. Linda played beautiful music, while Camilla took out poetry to recite. Her recitation skills were mediocre, and her gestures somewhat exaggerated, clearly displaying her perfect figure. As Doc was mesmerized, Sarah beside him invited him to see her collection. The first page she opened was filled with photos of scenes at the time of death. so bloody they were nauseating, but Sarah seemed very fond of them, as if they were her proud works, explaining these were how her former husbands looked when they died. The next page even contained her niece's hair. In short, this thick album was filled with items from the deceased. Doc felt a chill down his spine, finding it hard to accept. Perhaps this woman had some special fetish. He quickly made an excuse and hurried back to his room. Doc knew well that though roses were beautiful, they also had thorns. He decided to sleep early to rejuvenate for the morning. As long as he could contact Citizen Z, he would leave immediately. He always felt something eerie and sinister about this place. But not long after Doc lay down, he heard someone turning the doorknob. He cautiously approached. It was Sarah, who had changed into a seductive nightgown, only to bring some rabbit milk, claiming she had milked it herself. The intention to seduce was too obvious. Doc quickly calmed down, knowing he couldn't make a foolish mistake, so he briefly greeted her and sent her away. Finally, she left. But then Camilla entered, dressed even more seductively, bringing Doc her favorite collection of poems, instructing him to read them naked. While speaking, Camilla also made some flirtatious gestures. Doc was almost drooling, seeing this as a test, but after thinking it over, he maintained his resolve. So Camilla was also sent away. Truly two enchantresses. Before he could lie down again, Linda entered in a lace nightgown, bringing a knight's sword. As Linda caressed the blade, she accidentally cut her finger and gently sucked on it, her actions full of seduction. Seeing that Doc remained unmoved, Linda finally closed the door and left. From this situation, it seemed the three women were competing to see who could seduce Doc, but all failed. Doc sighed helplessly. The temptations outside were too great, and he wasn't sure if he could resist another time. To be safe, he wedged the door with a knife, hoping no one could enter now. But a few minutes later, as he was drifting off to sleep, the three women somehow got into his bed, each more seductive than the last. Upon opening his eyes and seeing them, Doc felt his mouth go dry, instantly realizing what the three women wanted. But how could pies just fall from the sky? He quickly reminded himself to stay alert.
Just walk away now before you end up pickled in a jar. Then again, it's the apocalypse.